Thank you for joining us. On our Sunday night series, we've been focusing on an outdoor classroom, lessons we can learn from animals around us. And one of the things that we've done, which I think has been really neat, is we're encouraging people to get involved with this. We especially want our children to get involved making some creations that can remind us of the animal for that week. And I have been really enjoying looking at all of those that are on our Facebook group. If you want to see some of those, you can look at our Facebook group, but we're going to share some of the ones that were created for last week. Last week we spent some time thinking about Isaiah chapter 40 and the fact that God will renew the strength of those who are weary like an eagle that's soaring over the world. And so as we thought about an eagle, we invited people to submit some pictures, some creations, some drawings. And so here's what we got. You'll be able to see some of these. Here's Lindley Ferris, who drew an eagle, did a great job. Jacob Landman also did a great job putting together an eagle drawing. David Landman gives us his eagle drawing, and he also included a Play-Doh creation of an eagle. Looks great. Doug Williams gave us a picture of an eagle having some fish on a golf course, which is not something you see every day. It's kind of interesting that he was able to catch that. Ben Nielsen, Ken and Debbie Wiles' grandson, made an eagle house on Minecraft, which is a pretty involved creation, and so he did a great job with that. Monty and Beth Tatum shared video of some eagles they saw in Alaska during feeding time. Catherine has been doing some watercolors over the last few weeks, and so she did a watercolor creation of an eagle. Micah Phillips created an eagle's nest on Minecraft, and so even though you might not love to draw, you've always got the Minecraft option where you can do some really incredible designs. Anna Winchester is showing off her eagle stuffed animal here. And then Jay Winchester drew an eagle. And it's incredible to see all the talent of all of these as we go through. It's just a lot of fun for us to participate. And so while we made the announcement a couple of days ago, this week we're thinking about another animal. And this one will be interesting for us to see not just the passage, but also some of the artwork that might come in. But we're going to learn some lessons from a donkey tonight. And so that's the animal. If you haven't submitted anything, but you want to do that over the next few days, put that on Facebook or send that to me, and we'll make sure that's part of the sermon. And you can know that you've contributed to some of the illustrating material as we've gone through this. I don't know if you've ever talked to animals. I've found that I do talk to animals, which kind of surprised me. But I found when we had a dog and Catherine and the boys would be somewhere for a long period of time, that I would just start talking to our dog. Maybe it's because I didn't want to talk to myself or just needed some company. But chances are a lot of us have done that. Whether we're just asking a dog to do something for us, to try to teach it a trick, or asking if it's hungry, or whatever that might be. We don't have problems talking to animals. What would surprise us is if that animal talked back to us. Then we might have some issues. Now, I've seen videos of dogs and other animals that make sounds, and it sounds like they're speaking English. And it can be kind of crazy to hear how some of those whines or some of those barks sound like English words. But I've never had the experience of the kind of conversation we're going to read about in Numbers 22. Now, as we think about this passage in which a man named Balaam talks to his donkey, and the donkey talks back, and by the way, he just carries on a conversation with him, which is the most amazing part to me, that if your donkey talked back to you, I think I might stop and say, wait a minute, what's happening? But he just keeps talking to the donkey. But as he does all of this, I know it sounds a little too incredible. And some people would look at this and say, well, now, how could this ever have happened? Maybe we have images in our mind of old reruns of Mr. Ed, for some of us, or maybe of a cartoon character like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. And that's what we're thinking of. We're not thinking of something that could really happen in real life. In fact, some people have said, how could people even believe that this took place? How could they they believe that an animal would actually talk and still have intelligence? How could you do that? And I think that may be one reason why we don't talk about this passage as much. And I certainly understand that. It might strain credibility for some people. My answer to that would just be, if I believe, and I do, that God created the world, and if I believe, and I do, that Jesus rose from the dead, if I serve a God that's powerful enough to create the entire world and is powerful enough to raise the dead, is there any miracle in Scripture that I can say he couldn't do? Is there any miracle in Scripture I could say, well, I would never believe this? And so I want to challenge us. If I believe in the beginning God created, and if I believe that he raised Jesus from the dead, then it doesn't matter what miracle I read about in Scripture. I know that I serve a God powerful enough to do it, and I need to look and to see what that miracle is teaching me. Now, we're going to do some background before we read Numbers chapter 22. It tells us about two different individuals. You have Balaam and Balak. Now, I will probably slip into the good old southern pronunciation of Balaam and Balak at some point. And so either one of those, you know who I'm talking about. But you have a king and a soothsayer, someone who is a diviner, who was known for being able to make prophecies and even pronounce curses. That's who Balaam was. And he's reached out to by the king of Moab, by Balak, because God has taken his people out of Egypt and the Israelites are growing in number. And so surrounding nations are starting to look at the number of Israelites and they're starting to say, I don't think I like this. I'm not comfortable with how large they're getting. This looks like a formidable group of individuals. I don't know how to deal with this. And so the Moabites want to take some action. The king wants to take action. Now, it's worth stopping and remembering the origin of the Moabites. It wasn't too long ago on Sunday nights when we did a series on Ruth, and we were reminded that Ruth was from the land of Moab. And we remembered how Moab came to be. After the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, as Lot and his family are leaving, and his wife turns and looks back, and that cost her her life. Lot is there with his daughters, and is there in this kind of desolate country away from everyone. His daughters despair of ever being able to find husbands and ever being able to have children. And so they get Lot drunk. And both of them, after doing that, conceive and give birth to children through an incestuous relationship. And Moab is one of those children. And so his descendants are connected in a way to Israel. And we can see the enmity that already exists. And so the king of Moab sends some messengers to Balaam, and they seems to have been making an offer. You come here and you pronounce a curse on the Israelites, and there'll be something in it for you. This is not unusual in the ancient world, and it would not be unusual for a soothsayer or a diviner to be given some money in order for someone to make that curse, or to say what needs to be said. In other words, he doesn't just do it for free. This is something that you're getting something for your money here. And so it seems like he's making him an offer. And so the first deputation goes out, and they say, we'd like for you to come. And Balaam says, well, let me spend the night and see what happens. And then God comes to him. Now, we don't know a lot about Balaam's life. This may be a situation that's a lot like the witch of Endor that we read about in the Old Testament. How Saul goes to the witch of Endor to get into contact with Samuel. And then when God actually seizes that moment for Samuel to show up, the witch of Endor seems shocked that he's actually there. This may have been a moment where Balaam is actually shocked that he's hearing from God. Or it may be that he had an understanding of who God was. But either way, God tells him, no, don't go with them. So he sends them away. But the king of Moab seems to take that as a negotiating tactic. So he sends more influential people, and I think we can infer a better offer to Balaam, and he decides he's going to consider it again. God had already told him once, he's going to consider it again. And then God says, okay, go with them, but you'll only say what I tell you to. And it's then we get to the part where he's on his way in verse 22 that I want us to start reading. If you would, make sure you have a Bible or a device with the Bible on it, or you can read along on the screen. But God was angry because he was going, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. Now he was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, the donkey turned off from the way and went into the field. But Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back into the way. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path of the vineyards, with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pressed herself to the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. The angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn to the right hand or the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam was angry and struck the donkey with his stick. And the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you, that you have struck me these 3 times? Then Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you've made a mockery of me. If there had been a sword in my hand, I would have killed you by now." The donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life to this day? Have I ever been accustomed to do so to you?" And he said, "No." Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed all the way to the ground. The angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out as an adversary because your way was contrary to me. But the donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, I would surely have killed you just now and let her live." Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the way against me. Now then, if it is displeasing to you, I will turn back." But the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you shall speak only the word which I tell you." So Balaam went again with the leaders of Balak. Now, again, this is hard for us to imagine. It's hard for us to imagine someone actually talking to an animal. And it's difficult for us to see, okay, at first God said no, then he asked again, and God said, okay, go, but now there's the angel of the Lord standing in his way. And while we don't know all the details about this, it may be that what Balaam had done was kind of a negotiating tactic. Maybe he was waiting for the right offer. It could be that God was allowing it to happen, but needed to provide some serious warning that he should only speak what God told him to speak. Whatever the case, we can learn a lot simply from this one brief interaction that we see here. When I think about a donkey, what could I possibly learn from this passage? Well, the first is obedience. Because as we think about Balaam's situation here, it seems very clear he's trying to decide who he's going to side with. Okay, he knows what God's message is. God's message is don't do this. Israel is blessed. You're not going to curse that nation. But then again, that offer's looking pretty good. And those people who are influential came to him, and who knows what that could lead to, and who knows what that could lead to. And there's power, and there's wealth, and so maybe I should do it. You can see how he's just sort of waffling from side to side who he's going to serve. Jesus would say in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6 and verse 24 that no one could serve 2 masters. And the reason is this: either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Specifically in that context, he's saying, if I'm divided in my loyalties, if I have a divided heart, I will eventually choose one master. I can't keep sliding back and forth. Not too much longer in the Old Testament, we'll read Joshua stand up before the people of Israel and say, choose this day whom you will serve. It might be the God of Israel, it might be the gods that are in the nations around us, but you've got to make a choice. All of us have to make that choice. And he had to make that. Who is he really going to obey? And the picture of him trying to force his donkey through the road, even when the angel of the Lord is standing there, is really a good image to describe him wrestling with what God wanted him to do here. And he does seem to encounter God at this point. We've mentioned before that there's a phrase in the Old Testament that shows up, the angel of the Lord. And the angel of the Lord seems to indicate a being that's different than other angels that we see referred to. There are times in which the angel of the Lord is in a setting where the angel of the Lord accepts worship. But when we see what other angels do, if someone bows down before them, which is not uncommon before an angel, they'll point people to God. They won't accept worship. But the angel of the Lord seems to. And here, Balaam bows down to the ground before the angel of the Lord. We also notice that the angel says in verse 35, "Go with the men, but you shall speak only the word which I tell you." In 23 and verse 5, we read that the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth. So in one case, you have the angel of the Lord saying, "I'm going to tell you the word." And then later, it's the Lord who's putting it in his mouth. So it seems to me that he's encountering the Lord here. And a helpful way for us to think about it is a pre-incarnate Jesus. Before the Word is made flesh, it seems there are moments when the Son comes as the angel of the Lord. And so here we have Balaam really being face to face with the Lord himself. And he has to question his motivations. Why am I really doing this? Am I really doing this because I want to serve God, or do I have another agenda in mind? And we've got to ask ourselves that question as well for our own obedience. You know, the Old Testament book of Job shows us attacks that Satan makes on Job, because when God singles out Job for his faithfulness, Satan says the only reason that Job is faithful is because you've blessed him. He's attacking the motivation of Job's obedience. And so the message of the book of Job is that Job's faithful to God no matter what, even in the face of unexplained suffering. And so that tells me that my motivation for obedience matters. It's important for me to think about that. It's also important for me to reflect on the fact that in the New Testament, Jesus constantly told the truth when it came to how life was going to be when you served with him. If you were going to follow Jesus, Jesus says you're not going to have a place to lay your head. You're not going to have a place to stay. You're going to have to take up your cross daily. He never sugarcoated what it meant to be a disciple. And so I'm going to have to test my motivations. Why do I want this? Who am I obeying, and why am I obeying that person? I need to examine myself. And when I bring things before God, I have to ask myself, am I bringing something before God saying, you know, I've already decided what I want to do. I've already decided what's going to be better, what's going to be more lucrative, what's going to make me more money, and I just really want you to bless what I'm doing. Or am I truly seeking to follow him? We can learn obedience, but we can also learn humility. Because apparently Balaam was a well-known prophet. He was from Pinthor, which perhaps would have been a city that was known for people with that kind of ability. But evidently he had a reputation that drew the king to him. And isn't it interesting that someone who is supposed to have the ability to be able to see spiritual things and to be able to understand what is happening, he's here on his donkey, and his donkey has a better understanding of what's going on than he does. I think that's significant. And Balaam's the one whose words are supposed to be so powerful, but it's this donkey that turns around and tells him what he really needs to hear. And it's really comical. I mean, just imagine what it would be like if for the third time he's hitting this donkey and the donkey turns around and says, "Why are you doing this?" I mean, how long have we been together? I don't usually do this kind of stuff, right? Have you thought about that? I mean, he's having an argument with this donkey. At this point, that animal has more spiritual insight than he does. And by the way, it's a reminder to me that if God can open the mouth of a donkey and communicate with people, then God can use anyone to communicate as well. I don't need to get too caught up in, well, I was able to talk to this person, and without my influence, this wouldn't have happened or this happened. God can use anyone, because the power is not in my own ability. The power is in the message. And God can put that message anywhere and get results. Now, it's interesting to see that even though this seems to be a moment where Balaam understands what's happening, and he's going to go on, and if you keep reading in chapter 23, there are multiple times where he'll open his mouth, but instead of cursing Israel, there'll be blessings that come out. God's in control there. But he also does something else. Aside from this whole business of either cursing or blessing Israel, he gives the king of Moab, Balak, some advice. As was often the case with Israel, they were drawn into idolatry. And the next few chapters talk about how Moabite women were enticing them to worship their idols and to eat meat that had been sacrificed to idols at these feasts. And Balaam gives Balak the advice That's the way. You really want to get Israel. That's the way to do it. To draw these men in, to allow them to be seduced by idolatry. In fact, we can go all the way to the New Testament book of Revelation. And in those first few chapters of Revelation, where we read about the letters to the churches in Asia, that really practical advice of what's happening in the church at the time Revelation was written. In Revelation 2, verse 14, that letter refers to some who hold the teaching of Balaam, who kept teaching Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit acts of immorality. When Christians would struggle with idolatry and faithlessness, they'd be reminded of Balaam. And so while it seems like he's given a lesson here, we see that it doesn't work out that way in the long run. Do I need to stop and learn a lesson in humility? Do I need to stop and be reminded of my own limitations and the fact that the good that's done through me is not because of me, but because of God? We've been reminded over the last couple of months that we don't have as much control as we thought we did. We probably don't have as much power as we thought we did. It's been humbling to realize that. Do I need to start operating out of humility? Do I need to listen to God even when it goes against what I want to do? It's not a problem to listen to God when I've already decided I want to do what He said I should do, but what if He says something different? And what if I don't really like it? Am I willing to listen to Him? Do I need to be willing to listen to other people, even when I'm sure I am right? I like the phrase I heard years ago. Someone described himself as often wrong, but never in doubt. And that could probably describe a lot of us at times. I might be wrong, but I'm completely sure that I'm right. Do I need to listen to other people? Obedience and humility. Simple lessons from a simple story. We don't spend much time thinking about it, but it's powerful for us. In fact, as I reflect on chapter 23, and I see the fact that even though the king of Moab is intending for cursing to take place, God is making those statements of blessings. I'm reminded of the fact that God can take any situation and God can do something positive through it. We are not going to stop hearing people speculate on why every little thing that's happening to us has happened. And some people are probably right, and some people are probably mistaken, and I don't know that I can tell which is which. But what I can do is decide, I might not know all the information about what's going on around me, but I can decide how I can seize this opportunity to do something good, to take what's not positive and to do something positive in the midst of it. Because the God that I serve can make that happen and can use me to do it. Again, we just want to emphasize with you that if you watched these videos, and if there's any way we can help you, we know there are a lot of people watching that don't live in Columbia. We're thankful for that. If you do live around here, or if you don't, but you have some questions we could help you answer, connect with us through the website. Those of us who are here locally, if there's something you need to pray about, or a spiritual need you have in your life, maybe you want to become a child of God and put Christ on in baptism, contact one of our elders. They would love to talk with you, to see what they can do to help. We all are in this together. We're not together physically, but we're together spiritually. Let's continue to remember that. This week, let's challenge ourselves. Make sure we're obeying. Make sure we're doing that in a spirit of humility, and that we're trusting in God who's more powerful than any other force around us, any other ruler that we can imagine in history, certainly more powerful than the king of Moab, and is more powerful than any circumstances we can face. He is on our side.